Thanks for joining us for Season 3 of the Stories Unveiled podcast. Stories Unveiled exists to create a platform for people to share hope through their personal stories of what Jesus does in their life. Each and every episode highlights a different guest, just like you and I, wading through this life that can get so messy. I hope this conversation proves helpful and encourages you to go live unveiled. Today, I have Evan Kraft in the studio with me. Evan is a chart-topping, bilingual, global recording artist that releases music in Spanish and English. He has over 1.6 billion global streams and over 53 million views. Evan's talent as a songwriter has taken his career to another level, starting out as a YouTube artist to making it to the top of Billboard Charts. Some popular hits include Be Alright, Desperado, Fight on My Knees, and his most recent release, Chances. Evan doesn't just have a heart for music, though. He is also committed to making a difference in the world. To date, he's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the homeless mission in LA that he co-founded, and I am super excited to have him here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
It's a privilege.
It's a privilege. Yeah, it's awesome. I just want to dive in, and that is quite the, I don't even know, quite the resume, I guess.
Yeah, when you put it that way, I mean, it's not how I usually introduce myself, but it's fun to read.
Yeah, well, it was fun to read for me too. Also, I have to say, so I've known about your It'll Be All Right? Is that?
Be All Right.
Be All Right. I've known about that song for a while. Such a good song. That's with Danny Gokey, isn't it? Yeah. And then I just heard Chances, which is out.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I watched...
With Kieran.
Yeah. So I watched the music video, and it literally gave me chills. It looked like it was from a movie, like it was supposed to be for a movie.
Yeah, it was really tough because Brad Pitt, he canceled last minute. And so we had to, do reshoots and stuff.
Pivot?
Yeah. No, we actually hired, we did it in Colombia, in Bogota,
really?
Colombia. Yeah.
Wow.
So we hired a team out there, Parabola Films, and they are incredible. I told the story to the director, and he just ran with it. I wasn't even there for... when they shot in the forest and when they're in the house and everything.
The video portion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told him what I wanted.
Yeah.
But he was like, I got you.
It was like a little movie. It was like a little...
He's very talented.
It was so good.
Yeah.
So the link for that will be in the show notes for this
Awesome.
podcast so people can go watch it. So good.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Chances just because it's your newest song, and I know that you've talked a little bit about why you wrote it, and I think you said something to the effect of what can I say about Christianity or about the gospel, redemption,
Yeah, I think I was speaking to my label about if this song doesn't resonate with people,
Totally.
I don't know what I can say.
Totally.
The gospel is about redemption. From Genesis all the way to Revelation, it is the story of God redeeming mankind.
Yeah.
And so, there's this overarching, theme of redemption, but also individually, we experience redemption. And so, Kieran and I wrote this song about 2 years ago,
Okay.
I think. It was Kieran and I wrote the song a few years ago, and when we wrote the chorus, we just start weeping. We were writing with our friend Monty, and sometimes when we're sitting in a writing session and we're like, what are we going to talk about? It's hard to go into those really sensitive topics of family and hurt and pain unless you're really good friends. And he and I were roommates.
Okay.
And so I knew a lot about his family, and so I asked him about his dad. His dad had been in and out of rehab, in and out of jail for certain things and for drug issues. And I knew that he had this pain that I had seen healed in a way, but still, it still hurts.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about that. My dad as well, he was a pastor of a growing church. He had a moral failure, lost his ministry. My parents got divorced. This was when I was 7 years old. And, there was these major lows And then, like we would see this, reconstruction of our lives, and then something else would happen. And, so Kieran and I both have these fatherly experiences of men that should have been examples for us. And we love our dads. We love them. But they failed. Today, both of our parents, or our dads, have incredible relationships with us. God has redeemed and restored them. My dad today is the director of the largest rescue mission in the United States.
Wow.
They have thousands of beds a night. They're doing incredible projects in Los Angeles. Kieran's dad has been sober for 4 or 5 years.
That's awesome.
He is, like Kieran always says, they talk every single day. He went to his wedding. They rebuilt their relationship. And so when we're talking about chances, like, God is the God of second chances. That no matter, Kieran didn't think that God would ever be able to redeem his dad. I know that, I was a kid when everything was happening, but I know my dad has thought, I messed up too much, God will never use me. And so, when we start to disqualify ourselves, and that's what actually the bridge says, like, you're not disqualified. To me, like, at first it was a little jarring because it's, like, so direct.
Yeah.
And our friend Mitch helped write that. But it's like, you're not disqualified. He'll never leave you stranded. Don't you believe the lie. Love doesn't run out of chances. And to me, it's like, that is what I want to teach my daughter.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we have a baby girl, and what is the legacy that we get to leave, and how do we teach her about God's love? Because I don't believe it's just this set of rules and traditions, and Christianity is just a religion that we follow. I believe that there is power in the name of Jesus to change our lives.
Yeah. So it's not just songs that you write. You literally live it. And
exactly.
Your songs are born out of real life experience and passion.
The good ones are. There's a lot of bad ones that, I'm like, I don't know what I just did for the last few hours, but the good ones are real.
Yeah.
Be All Right was, I wrote it before COVID in Spanish.
Yeah.
And then COVID started, and I'm in my house. My brother lost his job. My mom sent him to live with me. My best friends they flew out from California to stay with me in Tennessee, and they're producers. And so we're working and stuff, but I saw my brother. I had this Danny Goki sings the line that they say you hold the whole universe in your hands, but my world feels like it's falling apart, like it's made of sand.
Yeah.
And I just had this visual of how do we say God, and I had just realized, or someone had taught me that God is El Roy, the God who sees.
Yeah.
Right? So how do I say God is the God who sees me in this moment when everybody feels like their life was just blown up?
Yeah. Yeah.
So who am I? Who am I that you would look upon me in this moment and understand my pain and my hurt, and why do I matter? And so it was that's where things got real, where the rubber meets the road, and it's not just hey, I really hope people like this song. It's I need this song.
Yeah. I find that a lot of times when I'm asked to speak or when I'm asked to do things on a public platform, and I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to talk about? What for you, songwriting? And it's almost 100% of the time, whatever message or whatever it is I'm supposed to communicate is for me. I need it too.
Yeah, I think people love authenticity.
Yeah.
And I was reading about that today, even certain country music is growing and growing and growing in popularity, and it was saying because of the authenticity of it.
Totally.
And so same with Christian music, whatever it is,
Yeah.
You cannot, people identify with the human experience, and that is to be broken, that is to go through trials and storms and loss, and they're looking for how do I deal with this?
Yeah. And because you might not know, the name of this podcast is the Stories Unveiled podcast, and it was actually born out of just that. It was born out of back in 2017, really, but 2018 is when we started everything, out of a very real experience in me and my husband's journey together in marriage and addiction and betrayal and so many things that happened that was man, we can't be the only people going through this. And
Yeah.
why don't we talk about things more? And especially in the church and in the faith community, like, let's get real about what's going on, but like what God can do and redeem and restore, like you were talking about. And to just share your story of what God has done in your life is so powerful. And to be able to do that through music is my favorite.
Yeah, and I don't think that like things shouldn't be. I mean, obviously, we don't talk about them with like, in the middle of church with everybody.
No,
but
have
like,
discretion and wisdom.
yeah, but like there shouldn't be a taboo if you're going through something. I mean that is what. Like, I want to push the envelope a little bit in Christian music in the way that, like, we talk even just about doubt. Like, we're losing a generation of college-age students because we won't talk about doubt. We won't talk about, like, hey, like, you hear this in college, and then this doesn't make sense what you're hearing at church. And, like, so how do you deal with that?
How do you reconcile that?
Exactly.
And ask questions without somebody thinking that you've lost faith or...
Yeah, and I mean, I had that when I was like 25. I remember, like, I was like, I don't feel the presence of God, and I was like, doubting things, and I had someone just basically just like tell me to be quiet, and like you'll figure it out.
Helpful.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Because and then you learn, like, I went to seminary, that like there's this thing called the dark night of the soul, that like that you're not the first person to go through things.
Totally. Yeah. And God's not afraid of our pain. He's not afraid of our doubt. He can handle all of it.
Exactly.
So that's amazing. So you wrote Be All Right prior to COVID, you said.
Yeah.
And you wrote it all in Spanish?
Yes.
Originally?
Yeah.
Because it's not now. There's like a handful of...
We have a Spanish version. That's,
Okay.
I mean, that was... The reason I wrote it in English was like, I mean, it did so well, and I was like, maybe I should try to... everyone's going through something, so why not...
Why not for everybody?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So talk to me about your bilingual album, multiple albums, and what caused you to, because obviously you speak Spanish, but what caused you to go bilingual, like the bilingual route? And
so I grew up in Southern California, and I was taking Spanish classes. My dad starts working at a homeless shelter, and I fell in love with Spanish. And a lot of the guests were from Central America, so I would talk to them about where they're from, and I just fell in love with the language. I ended up studying abroad, and I was going to go to Italy, and my dad was like, well, how many people do you know that speak Italian? I'm like, Cero, I don't know. I was like, no, I don't know anybody that speaks Italian, and he's like, you should go to Spain. So I just switched over my study abroad program, which had such a huge impact in my life because I met some incredible Christians out in Spain. I also realized that there were not a lot of Christians in Spain.
Where in Spain? Can I ask?
I was in Salamanca.
Okay.
And so I met this Christian band that played at like a salsa club one night. I was like walking by and like went in and became really good friends with them. They're called Papel Maché. They're from Barcelona. And so I ended up, after studying, going to Barcelona, hanging out with them. I go back home, and I reach out to some pastors in San Diego, but then I saw this little church in Tijuana, or Rosarito. And so I reached out to them, and they never got back to me. I ended up meeting somebody who was in charge of like missions for my denomination that I grew up in, and they connected me. And I go down to Mexico. I had a Toyota Tacoma that like a little beat up car.
And you drove.
I drove to San Diego, and they picked me up, took me across the border.
All right.
My first time, and they take me to this like tent meeting, and I have this crazy encounter with God there.
Wow.
Like, I'm skipping over a lot of details, but
Yeah.
I thought, I read this book by Reinhard Bonnke. I thought I'm the next Billy Graham. I'm like, oh my gosh, Latin America, get ready. Well, really, I was hoping to go to Africa, but I had no money. But I'm like, oh, I kind of speak Spanish. Like, I'm just at left field right here. And I'm like, I'm from LA. Like, I'm gonna just get ready. And so I get down this tent meeting. They have church 6 days a week, dirt floors, construction lights. I mean, it is not what I consider church.
Yeah.
And there are 60 old ladies, 20 like teenagers, young adults, and they're like, oh, well, you're gonna be the next Billy Graham, so like, why don't you preach and like, why don't you sing? And I'm like, oh, I actually barely speak Spanish. I had studied abroad, but like, I mean, learning a language and preaching in the language and communicating is, very different.
Yeah.
And so I sang 3 songs I knew.
In Spanish?
I had written 2.
Okay, so they didn't know them.
No, but they were very simple.
Yeah.
I sang Fire Fall Down from Hillsong.
Yep.
But I felt the presence of God when these elderly women were singing like I had never felt in my church.
That's amazing.
And so I always say, like, it was like God gave me a little slap in the face of like una cachetada in Spanish, of like, nothing is going to happen in your life or in your ministry until you learn to love my people. Like, this is not about you. This is not about, lifting you up or being a figure anywhere, but it's about serving and loving my people. And so I stayed with these missionaries for a few months. We'd go up to these like hillsides that they had a little like tiny bus, and we'd do church in the bus, like a short bus. And then I ended up writing and recording a Spanish album. And like I worked at Starbucks, so I was like, anytime somebody would come in and like had an accent, I'd be like, ¿Hablas español? And like they'd be like, yeah. And so I had to help them get their order right, because they would always order like a cappuccino when they wanted a frappuccino.
Oh.
And I'm like, it's hot outside.
Yeah.
I don't think you want a hot drink.
Right.
And they were like, oh, thank you. And I realized something so small was so big that like speaking someone's language, they automatically feel just like welcomed and at home.
Yeah.
And so I would ask some people like, hey, can you look over like the lyrics of these songs I've been writing? And like people were super nice about it. I recorded and released an album called Yo Soy Segundo. So I had released two English albums, and like really felt that God shut the door on it.
Really?
Like, this is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And like I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the support. I signed a label deal, and like it was a disaster. And I tell the label, hey, I'm gonna do a Spanish album. They're like, pay for it yourself. And so I'm like, fine.
Okay.
I'm 21 years old. I'm like,
I do what I want.
I work at Starbucks. Of course I can do this, right? But I end up writing a letter to family and friends and churches and be like, hey, I really believe God is calling me to Latin America, and I need to record an album in Spanish. And I am not good at this, and I'm going to work very hard. So I turned everything on in Spanish. Radio, books, TV, movies, friends, just everything from Thousand Oaks, California. Like I was 21 years old,
Yeah.
and I ended up switching my degree to Spanish.
Wow.
And so I live, breathe, eat Spanish. I end up going to study in Costa Rica again, or after Spain. I'm getting actually like decent. And
At Spanish?
At Spanish.
Okay.
And I listen to a lot of music, and I read a lot. For people who are like, oh man, I really want to learn a language, I would listen to the Bible, and I would read it, and I would repeat it.
Okay.
And so that way I'm getting the audio, like I'm getting the visual, and I'm getting the practice, like speaking it.
Yeah.
So I write this album, record it with my best friend, who is now a very successful producer in LA.
Okay.
But he took a bet on me.
Yeah.
And I go to Colombia the next day. I don't know anybody. I go to Bogota, Colombia, and I'm thinking like I'm like, it's good. I'm going to the beach. I'm like 8,500 feet up.
Oh, you're not by a beach.
Oh, not by the beach.
No.
I'm like cold. It's
Yeah.
like rainy. I'm like, the city is terrible. I'm sorry, Colombians. It's not my favorite city. I didn't end up going to like Medellin or like the cities I love till a few years later. But I mean, it's just like traffic and like, but I met some incredible people and incredible Christians there. And so they're taking me to all these radio stations, and they're like, I told the pastor, like, I'll sleep on your couch. I'll clean toilets. I'll do anything.
That's amazing.
And he says, just do me a favor, translate this song 10,000 Reasons.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, okay, this is 2012. I'm like, I'm not really like a translator, like I'm not that good at Spanish.
Yeah.
Like, and he's like, can you just do this? So I'm there for 3 weeks. I finally do it the last week, and he loves it. I go home. I just open up like 5 versions of the Bible and like Psalms 103. I'm like stitching things together. I'm like, well, this kind of rhymes. Like, okay, let's go. And so I go home. One of my best friends, Sean, and I like get together. We record this song, and we put it up on YouTube. And we're like, if it gets 10,000 views, this will be the best thing that ever happens. It went like wildfire.
Really?
Like, I had no idea that I was, like, basically holding onto a cannon.
Wow.
And then, so that video goes viral. Then we do another one. We just do like a
different song.
Hillsong one or like a Bethel or, whoever. And it goes viral. And so I ended up like, I'm writing my own songs, but I'm also like, oh, wow. Like there is an underserved market, underserved people group, and that's just Spanish speakers in the Spanish church. And at the time, I mean, it wasn't common for everyone to have like LED screens and use tracks and all this stuff. And so I just started putting out these acoustic versions. It cost me like nothing.
Yeah.
Me, an acoustic guitar, and my friend playing piano. And we were the first people to do Oceans.
Wow, in Spanish?
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
I mean, 3 years before Hillsong ever did it. And it has like 100 million views on YouTube. Wow. I mean, we had no idea that like God was placing in our hearts something that was going to be such a resource for the Latin church. And so from then on, it was 2012 to 2020, all I did was Spanish.
Okay.
And I released like 4 or 5 albums in Spanish, and it was just like I was literally like holding on for dear life. Like, I mean,
all right, Lord.
Yeah, like people are like, hey, will you come do tours in Argentina? And I'm like, sure. Like, I don't know anybody in Argentina, and like I'm going by myself.
Yeah.
Just trusting, like, like, all right, if I die, I die. Like, but I remember being like, okay, Lord, if this is something you're doing in my life, you're going to, 1, protect me, but 2, you're going to make a way. I mean, it was not easy.
Yeah.
But my Spanish significantly improved after I graduated with a degree in Spanish, but then I toured.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not touring like a bus tour, like, hey, this is like, I'm staying in super nice hotels. I'm staying with families a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my kid's gonna sleep in my room, you're sleeping in their bed for the first like few years. And like, I mean, just
like missions, like missionary type, like.
Oh yeah, and I'm like, I'm undercharging like so much.
Yeah.
I'm like, you just pay my stuff, and I'm like, if I get there, awesome.
Great.
And like, me and a buddy were going and doing acoustic concerts, but like, thousands of people are showing up. So we had no idea. Like, I mean, obviously we started building a team, and like, lots of people were helping us. But it was 4 guys like in our 20s touring around Latin America. Only 2 of us were actually Latino.
Oh.
And so the rest of us, I mean, we're, from Southern California and just having a blast. Getting to go to Spain. I mean, I played first in England, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France in Spanish.
That's amazing.
Like, have never done anything besides Romanian English.
Okay.
And so it was crazy how God was like flipping this idea that I had and this that I was like, oh, English music doesn't work. I'm gonna go be a missionary. But he's like, this no is not a no forever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take you on such an amazing journey. And like, the reason I share all this is because I fell in love with Latin America. My wife was a missionary in Mexico, in Mazatlan. We met in 2017, reconnected in Nashville. But like, our heart is like, we love the Latino community.
Yeah.
And we want to see the church grow and flourish. We go to a Spanish-speaking church in Houston, Texas, called Osana Woodlands. And I mean, that's where our heart is. And so when, for anybody listening, like, sometimes a no hurts and it feels like my dreams are being squashed, but sometimes God has something so much better. And I say better because it's the right fit for me.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to be Danny Gokey. I'm not trying to be Torrin Wells. Like, I understand that I feel most alive when I am doing what God has made and designed me to do.
Right.
And so that was like, I get to go to little towns in Bolivia. I get to go to little towns in Guatemala and Mexico where, most CCM artists never will be able to go.
Yeah.
But that's a unique design that God's had in my life.
That's amazing. I love that. And he needed to take you through that to get you where you are.
He needed to break me. He needed to break me.
All right, I guess let's be honest.
Yeah.
He just needed to break you.
Like into little pieces and rebuild me, right? Like, I think it's called kintsugi, which is like the kintsugi, which is like the Japanese art of like, they break a pot and then it's like gold, or
they
gold.
fill the.
That's how I feel like God has had to do, but like multiple times, just pulverize me in the best possible way.
Right, but that's kind of life too? I mean, some people are maybe broken they're broken in different ways, but we've all got plans for our life.
Yes.
And especially if you invite God into that and, you're like, okay, Lord, but like, this is what I want. Like, this is what I'm going to do. God's like, hang on a minute. Like, are you going to let me guide this or not? And he's got to take us on a journey to what he has for us.
Yeah. And I think like in seminary, they talked about there's ways to learn lessons. And like, I want to tell my daughter, don't touch the stove because it's hot. And I want her to listen. I don't want her to have to learn by her own mistake. There's some things that you have to learn by your own mistake. And other things, it's like, really, you don't need to learn that like, hey, this is going to burn you.
Right.
Like, it's better to listen to God than to make your own mistakes.
Because he knows better.
And, and I think like, in some ways, like there were some things that, God was very gentle, in reality. Like, it broke me and like it molded me, but like in a way that was God was humbling me to. I remember I was in Bolivia and it was just going so bad. Like no one was paying us. My band was about to mutiny.
Oh no!
We show up and they're not picking us up from the airport. Like, where's the hotel? Like. And like,
oh, that's not
we're in a country where I've never been to Cochabamba, Bolivia.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know where to go. And our tour manager like was basically a missionary. So he's like, oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to pay us. And I'm like, you can't do this. But I remember calling my mentor and being like, he's a very successful incredibly influential Spanish Christian artist. I'm like, give me one reason not to burn my ministry career to the ground right now. And he starts laughing. He's like, I'm so glad you're going through this because obviously that's happened to me too.
Yeah.
And he goes, are you an artist or are you a soldier? Like, what is your purpose? Has God made you, do you need to have the right sound system? Do you need to have the right things? Or like tonight, as you're going to go to this stage, whether they've honored you or not, are you going to do the thing that God has called you to do today?
That's good.
Like, despite all these other circumstances, are you going to fulfill the purpose in your life? I mean, like, it was a radical, like, eye-opening conversation for me of like, yes, I would love to be Taylor Swift and singing at SoFi Stadium and having my documentary on all these
Netflix
platforms.
And all the things, yeah.
Yeah. But this is where God has taken me.
Yeah.
And I can spend my life wishing I had this, or I can go full throttle into what God has for me.
Yeah.
And so I would rather do that. And I think what my point is, like, you can learn a lesson that you'll burn yourself trying to be something that you're not, or following God and like being obedient will save you so much heartache and pain and hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's true.
But it still will hurt.
Well, it still will hurt, but it's a beautiful thing, right? Like on the other side.
It's pain that I feel like you have. When it's pain that God has led you into, you have a grace for it. When it's pain that you've led yourself into, it's very frustrating.
Self-induced.
Yes.
Self-induced pain gets really frustrating too. Oh man. Tell me a little bit about this nonprofit that you started. Is that correct?
So I didn't start.
Okay.
And I don't run anything.
Okay.
My dad is the founder and director of Hope the Mission, which is a rescue mission in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so I started something called Mi Casa LA, which is a benefit concert series. In English, we call it Hope the Concert. And so we've had Marcos Witt, we've had Marco Barrientos in Spanish, Rey Mios, and then in English we've had Matt Redman, Israel Houghton. This year we've had Danny Goki. And they're concerts that is hosted by a church called Shepherd Church in Porter Ranch, California. Yeah. And 100% of the proceeds go to helping the homeless. Okay. And so my dad is an aggressive strategist for helping people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. He's been called upon by the government to do things that, where even their budget is 15 times bigger than it was pre-COVID today. I mean, they're buying motels and renovating them. They're being extremely aggressive in helping house people.
Yeah.
And so it's, and I know there's, I've had actually some interviews where people are like, well, the government doesn't do anything for it. It's a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
You have a lot of people with mental health issues, a lot of people who, I mean, look, our healthcare system is not made for the most at-risk people.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people I've met that have had cancer and their treatments are too expensive, they've lost their homes, and so they end up on the streets and they're looking for ways out. I've met 24-year-olds in when I spent a night at the rescue mission with my pastor one time, and I mean,
Talk about like getting in the trenches, like.
Oh yeah, my dad has spent a week on the street. He's lived in a car for a week. He's cycled across the nation to have meetings in D.C. and like meet with rescue missions across the country. And so he's all in it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he ran from Vegas to L.A. Ran.
Like
yes.
Like physically.
Yes.
That's depending on the time of year. That's brutal.
Oh, it was cold.
Oh, it was cold.
Oh yeah. I mean, he got pneumonia when he was cycling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Because they went through New Mexico and it was, I mean, it's super high, super cold. But they are the most aggressive rescue mission housing people right now. And so the first step you got to do is just get people off the streets.
Yeah.
And, I mean, first of all, people don't want, somebody on the street behind their house.
Right.
We want to have somebody there so we can say, hey, what do you need? Like, what mental health issues do you have? Like, how can, we get you out of, the situation and bring some support around you. It's expensive. It's costly. It is, it's something that I don't know will ever go away.
Yeah.
But it's something that as a, the church, my dad makes a good point, is that most rescue missions and most nonprofits that would actually, help those that are hurting, the sick, the poor, we're Christian.
Yeah.
They started by Catholic churches. They're started by, Samaritan's Purse type thing, or Goodwill, or all these, a lot of, or maybe not, might be mixing one up, but they were started by the church to help the broken. And so I think, his point is today he uses a lot of government funding, but the problem is that not a lot of churches are actually giving.
Yeah.
And so we, as Christians, or, I'm not trying to get political, but we can say, well, the government's not doing anything, but what is the church doing?
Yeah.
How are we really coming around those? And because these are sticky issues that nobody really wants, it's not our first choice to helping someone get off, or, get on their feet is a process. It's not like, hey, here's $5, go figure it out.
It's not a quick fix.
Yeah, and so they are committed to doing that and helping. And I mean, they have a huge kitchen, and a lot of people that have gone through their programs are now cooking and helping other people. So it's beautiful. I have been able to raise with other artists over $500,000 to help start little shelters in different parts of the city, which it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do our part, and more than anything, let people know, hey, this is where you can serve, this is where you can give, and this is how your church can be involved.
That's awesome. So it's the concerts that you do that have helped raise money for this. I guess it's considered. Is it a nonprofit? I mean,
yeah, no. So Hope the Mission is a nonprofit.
Is a nonprofit, and that's what your dad does.
I mean, I personally have not been profitable on. I mean, the concerts have, but
no, that's what I meant.
Yes.
You have been part of
we have been
That's
given
amazing.
All the money to the rescue mission.
That's amazing. I want to back up when you were talking about you met your wife in 2017, and then you reconnected in Nashville or in Tennessee. Is that what you said?
In Nashville.
In Nashville. And you told me earlier that you guys have been married for 3 years, almost.
Yeah, almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years. Tell me about how you guys met. Tell me, or I guess how you reconnected.
We have a funny story because we didn't actually meet face-to-face in 2017.
Okay.
But I did a concert in Mazatlan, Mexico, and with a few other artists. Jeremy Camp was actually there. It was the first time I'd ever worked with an English artist.
Oh, okay.
And so my wife was serving with a ministry called Back to Back, and she brought children from the children's home that, I mean, they don't they're either taken away from their parents because they're not fit to parent them, or their parents had given them up. And so she brought this kid who had cerebral palsy, and it was at a baseball stadium. So she wasn't able to take him up into the stands because they didn't have like wheelchair accessibility.
Yeah.
So I take a picture with him. I mean, just fast, I leave, and she messages me the next day on Instagram saying, hey, can you print this picture out, sign it, and send it to my parents in Nashville? And, you know, I was single, so like I'm looking through my DMs, and like, oh, there's a blonde girl, hey. You know, I mean, I worked strictly in Latin America. There weren't a lot of blonde women that would message me. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing in Mexico? And she's like, I'm a missionary. Could you please sign this? You know, and I'm like,
just business.
Yeah. I'm like, well, like, you know, like, what do you speak Spanish? Like, where you from? Like, you know, oh yeah, I'll sign it. Like, of course I'll do it. And she's like, oh, cool. Well, you can send it to my parents. And so like, she was just like, yeah, she was
not picking up. She was like, business, this is all.
Well, and I'm like, oh, I love Latin America. It's so great. Things are amazing. It's beautiful, fun. And she's like, I'm literally responding to you while I'm holding a child who is addicted to drugs because their parents were drug addicts. And I'm not on the same
I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And we're not, like, you and I are not the same.
Yeah, and so we stopped talking. I didn't send it.
Oh.
And
you didn't?
I didn't send it. I looked back at the timeline. My band quit the same time frame she was asking me to do it.
Okay.
And so that was a long story, radical thing that, like, you know, we lived together. So I was like, God, I'm abandoned.
Yeah.
I have nothing.
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? And so that's why I believe I got distracted. A year later, she sends me a video of this kid. I can't say his name for legal reasons. And so he's saying hi to me and saying, hey, I love your music. So I sent him a video back, kind of redeemed myself. It's 2018, 2020. I moved to Nashville.
Okay.
And my goal is I'm going to go and create some space for Spanish artists. My wife then moves from Mexico to Nashville because she doesn't know if the borders are going to open, and like, I got to get out of Mexico quick. Yeah. And she was like, she had been trying to leave, but she had been like, she's like tried to buy a coffee shop in Mexico so she didn't have to leave. She's like, I knew it was time to go, but I desperately didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
And so she messages me August of 2020 and just, hey, can you, like, I need to meet some people and some friends, like, and you know, I'm looking for maybe some Spanish speakers, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can, like, immediately. I text her back within a minute.
Yeah.
And then I had been like stood up. So like, I was like, I'm not really looking to meet anybody. Like, I like just had my heart, like, you know, I was like sitting at a restaurant, I'm like, this is like a movie. This is like a movie, and I am at the lowest point of my life.
Oh no.
And they're like, hey, are you waiting for someone? I'm like, wow. Just wow. So she's like, well, can we meet up? And I'm like, yeah, 7 a.m., I'm busy. Like, she's like, I'm not doing that at 7.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Well, I was going to cancel on her like 6 p.m. for something, and my friend's like, one of my best friends like, you're pathetic. You need to go. Like, I'm going to smack you if you don't go to meet this girl. Just like introduce her to people, like do something.
Yeah.
And so I show up, I took a nap. I didn't do my hair. I was in sweats. I was like, I don't care. And she walks up, and we had never seen each other.
Okay.
And my wife never posts on Instagram. So like, I thought she was like taller than me. I was like not interested. I was like, you know, whatever.
Did not care about putting your best foot forward. You
did
were like,
not
whatever.
put my best foot forward. And I saw her, and I was like, oh, wow.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Can I run home real fast?
So I'm like, I get like, yeah, it was bad, but we hit it off.
That's
we
awesome.
went to Bar Taco in off 12 South in Nashville, and like we talked for a long time. Went and got ice cream. I mean, it wasn't a date, but it turned into a date.
Totally.
Right? And then that week, like, you know, we saw each other again. We stayed up till 2 a.m. talking.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I need to see you again and again and again and again. And she was like, she's getting her master's. She's like, I can't like just dedicate my life to you. And I was like, I have no work right now. Like, it's COVID. I can't do anything. Like, I need to see you. And she's like, okay. So we got married a year later. Yeah.
That's a great story, Evan.
Yeah. But I mean, it's been amazing. We moved to Houston, Texas. And like our marriage was not like smooth sailing like from day one. Like, I was 30 when I got married.
Okay.
She moved into my house. So I had my ways, my things set.
Yeah.
She, I got married thinking like, oh, I see, there's some things that like I'm gonna change. And I mean, you've been married for
19 years.
Yeah. So you know that doesn't necessarily work.
Totally.
And so it's been an amazing journey of like learning to love each other.
Yeah.
Despite both of our deficiencies, and like how to, like I have strengths in her weaknesses and vice versa. But we have a beautiful daughter named Sophia, and she is just a cutie pie.
Oh.
So it's like, I mean, we're loving it. We want more kids. It's been absolutely amazing. And also, I mean, it's work. It's like
totally.
Being a parent is work.
Being a parent is work. I have 3.
Yeah. But I enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
Like we fly a lot, and flying when it's like just you is like, oh, I have my iPad, I download some shows, I'm gonna just chill for a few hours. And now it's like, we're like juggling a baby. I'm like, can you just fall asleep, please?
Can I just tell you that doesn't really change? My youngest is 13, my oldest is 18, and I travel alone, and I'm like plugged in, I'm like doing my own thing. Or if me and my husband, right, I'm still plugged in, doing my own thing.
Yeah.
I have my kids who are all self-sufficient, and I'm still like, what do you need? Like, do you need like, and I'm still just like, one AirPod out or one like, just to like make sure that like
that might be a mom thing though.
Maybe
I think
that also might be.
Dads are like, they're fine. Like,
all right, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. I look over at my husband and I'm like, hey.
My wife is like, she woke up, our daughter woke up the other day, and like, I mean, like, it's like, she goes to bed at 7.
Yeah.
It's like 8. She's like, but she's not going back to sleep. What do we do? I'm like, just leave her. like she'll fall back asleep. She's like, she's crying. I'm like, if it's not like 45 minutes, I don't care. Like, this little girl's got to learn to go back to sleep.
That is maybe a dad response too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I want to just ask you, just kind of a blanket statement, but what encouragement would you give to our listeners, just in any form, like their walk with God or whatever? What encouragement?
I think the thing that has helped me the most in my life is like being involved in a great church. I mean, and being a great church doesn't, like, not every church is going to be like, well, they're not perfect.
No.
I'll tell you that for sure.
No, none of them.
But you being involved in serving, serving on the worship team is where I've met some of my best friends, where I've had incredible relationships that are deep. And like every city I've moved to, I've lived in Houston, I've lived in South America, I've lived in Florida and Nashville. Everywhere where I've been connected to a church is where I've found health. And so, like, there's a reason, the Bible says, don't stop congregating together.
Yeah.
And so iron sharpens iron, and like we find encouragement, we find life. I mean, we were not like, no man is an island. We need people, and that's a gift from God.
Yeah.
And so your relationship will strengthen when you're serving, when you're like, finding brothers and sisters in Christ. And like they also say it takes a village to raise a kid. And so like that's why my wife and I moved to Houston, was to be part of a beautiful, vibrant, healthy and not healthy church, but we're committed to seeing the kingdom of God manifest here on earth. And so that's one of my number one encouragements to everybody.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Evan, I appreciate you being here with me today, and just look forward to what's to come.
Thanks so much. And my other encouragement is just go learn Spanish so you can listen to the rest of my music.
I know you're really you are encouraging me. I know just enough to get me into trouble, if I'm being honest. I've been to Mexico and I've been to Spain, and I know just enough for people to think I speak Spanish, and then they start speaking and I'm like, whoa, no, I actually don't understand anything you're saying. So.
Well, Duolingo.
Yeah, Duolingo. All right, shameless plug.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Evan.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.